Welcome back to the Suhu podcast, everybody. Today we are talking about hair, but more importantly, we're talking about what the hair comes out of, otherwise known as your scalp. Most hair conversations focus entirely on these strands, how shiny they are, how strong they are, the frizz, the thickness. Those things matter, but they are downstream effects. They are the outcome, not the cause. Healthy hair starts with a healthy scalp. And scalp health is not about one miracle ingredient or one aggressive treatment. It's the whole systems problem. It's about circulation, barrier health, inflammation, stress, and consistency over time. And the last part is really key. Circulation in particular is something that gets mentioned a lot, but never explained clearly. So today we want to talk about what circulation actually means for the scalp, why it matters, and how to think about hair care in a way that supports long-term health instead of chasing shortcuts. Lydia, before we get into it, can you give a quick grounding for why the scalp matters so much biologically?
Yeah, totally. So it's really interesting, right? Like we have a lot of skin products for the face, and I think only recently have I really began to notice people directly addressing scalp health, like from a marketing standpoint. And now, like, there's so many products, right, that we see on TikTok, Instagram, and they're all like, have the optimal scalp health, grow your hair, solve all these problems. And then there's also a lot of other procedures, right, that you can have done. To be honest, like a lot of these things are not necessarily effective, and we'll talk about why that's the case. And we'll also talk about the things that are effective. But holistically, your scalp health matters because it's part of your skin, it's part of your organ, the biggest organ in your body. And in order to keep your hair growing, you need to be providing your scalp with the right materials to actually grow hair. And hair is a very energy consuming process. So your hair follicles, they don't want to grow properly if you aren't providing them with the correct energy resources. And we'll talk about what those resources are as well in this podcast. The key takeaway here is that if we're taking care of our skin on our scalp, we're going to be contributing to a healthier environment overall for hair growth.
Cool. So I'd like to start with a framing question. Why do we spend so much time treating hair, but almost no time thinking about the scalp? Most consumer habits are very strand focused. We are overwashing. We're layering products on top of buildup. We scrub harder when something feels off, and we carry a lot of tension in our bodies that we never really address at the scalp level. Stress shows up in the neck, the shoulders, and the scalp, but we rarely connect that tension to our hair health. The way I like to think about this is soil health, going back to last week's conversation about sourcing ethically. You can't grow strong plants in depleted or compacted soil. You can pour fertilizers and nutrients on top all day long, but if the environment underneath is stressed, the results are always going to be limited. Hair follicles live in your scalp. So if the scalp is inflamed or tight or poorly supported or disrupted, the hair growth that grows out of it is going to reflect that. So before we talk about stimulation or ingredients or products, we have to zoom out and acknowledge that hair growth is a biological process happening in living tissue, not something just happening on the surface.
Yeah, and oh my gosh, York, as you said that about the tension in the shoulders, I felt myself like consciously.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's so true though, right? And like if we want to drop down into the biology of a hair cell, we can think about a couple things, right? So your actual hair follicles health really depends on being able to deliver a payload of energy and nutrients to it consistently. And how are we bringing the nutrients to your follicle? Well, we're doing that through the blood. And so it's really important that whatever blood flow system is happening in your scalp is one where the blood flow is actually reaching the hair follicle. And it's really cool to kind of think about how this works because it is a little different from like maybe how you think blood flow typically works. But basically within your dermis, which is where the hair follicle sits, so it's deeper into your skin rather than sitting on the surface, right? It's like 6 millimeters. So you can think of like half a centimeter as a good reference point. But when you're thinking about it, and we'll talk about this too, that is fairly deep into the skin. Most skin products do not penetrate that deep, just as a heads up. And we'll talk about that a little bit too. But what is that deep is fat. And so you have these subcutaneous like fat highway systems where the blood is basically flowing and pumping up through the fat tissue. And it provides the pressure to essentially like push the blood flow into the areas near your hair follicle. And then you can think of around the follicle itself, there's like a web of vessels, and that wraps around the whole follicle, and that's called the parafollicular capillary network. And so that's like the tips of the blood vessels, basically, like whoop, up around the hair follicle. And then at the base of the follicle is a dermal papilla, which is basically a specialized capillary loop. So blood is basically getting directly into the cells that interact with the hair. And that's like the key point where like anything that needs to get delivered to the follicle to grow needs to reach there. And so when you're thinking about hair growth, when the hair is in the actual growth phase, which is called the anagen phase, so there's different phases of your hair, and the follicle can be healthy and in different phases. But when it's in the growth phase and it's healthy, that hair follicle actually stimulates additional blood growth to the area, and specifically does that through a growth factor called vascular endothelial growth factor, or VEGF. And that leads to this new blood vessel formation, improving that blood flow around the active hair follicle. So really the critical question right then is, how do we improve the highways of blood to the hair follicle while it's in the growth phase so that it can grow beautiful long hair? And I really want to take a pause here just to kind of talk a little bit about hair loss, because our podcast today is really around like supporting your skin's overall health on your scalp. And we're not really going to be diving too deep into like the different types of hair loss or what to do and what not to do. And kind of the reasoning around that is hair loss is not caused by one individual thing. And so the key takeaway here is, if you do notice that your hair is starting to fall out, or you're noticing a lot of extra shedding, or something doesn't feel right to you on your scalp and it's beyond just normal care, you should go see a dermatologist, and you should go work with someone who can actually look at the root cause of your hair loss, because there are a number of different ones, and we'll cover a few here just so you have them from like a chemist perspective. One is hormonal or genetic related. You can think of baldness being potentially caused by a hormone issue, and usually what happens is there's this chemical called DHT that is produced in your cells, and if it's elevated, it will bind to your hair follicle, and it will eventually cause that hair follicle to die off. And if that's happening, then you obviously can be doing a lot of wonderful things for your scalp, but you may need to address the root cause of that issue, or you may need to take a medication that specifically blocks the DHT formation, and you'll need to see a doctor to kind of figure that out. And then the other one that we will talk a little bit about today, just because it affects your skin health just as much as your hair growth, is stress. If you have a stressful incident like a car crash, a surgery, or you have chronic stress that's really elevating cortisol in your body, what happens is it doesn't really kill off the follicle, but it does basically put the follicle to sleep. So I said there's that stage of growth. There's also a stage of sleep. And if the follicle is turned off, then you're not going to be seeing hair growth. And one of the things people don't always realize is, if you go through a traumatic event, you won't necessarily see the hair fall out right after that event. It's going to be like 3 or 4 months down the road, which is basically when the shedding is going to happen. So in cases like that, you can remove the stressor, or maybe it's already removed. But the key thing there is to, again, just kind of go back to your normal hair care, normal health of your scalp care, and address it from a more holistic perspective, rather than panicking and buying a bunch of supplements or something or getting a bunch of treatment done. Go check in with your health specialist and go from there. And then 2 more that I just want to touch on. One is if you have a true nutrient deficiency. Hair needs a few things. It needs amino acids. It needs zinc. It needs iron. If you have a true iron deficiency, it can cause some hair problems. If you have a true amino acid deficiency, it can cause hair problems. This is something that can also be diagnosed, right? if you don't have a true nutrient deficiency, it's actually not necessarily helpful to just take a supplement that oversaturates your system. So, for example, there are supplements on the market that charge $100 a month to subscribe for hair supplements, right? And they are pumping your system, not all of them, but in many cases, they're pumping your system with like a ton of biotin, a ton of these things that really your system is probably already saturated. And so adding all of that extra on top of it is not necessarily going to improve your hair growth if you
It can
have a real
sometimes
nutrient
be
deficiency.
harmful, right?
Yeah, it can. And some things like biotin can interfere with other tests. So if you do have like a thyroid issue or something else and you're taking a lot of biotin on top of it, sometimes your results don't come back normal. So again, in this case, right, like if you do go to a doctor, tell them like I'm taking biotin supplements, I'm taking these things. You got to come back to the root cause, right? And finally, want to cover just natural aging and environmental stressor. So many products, especially targeting women who are like going through menopause, they come onto the marketplace and they're like, spend $100 a month, or they're like, you need to do this to address your hair loss. You need to do this. And I just really want to emphasize that like does not necessarily mean that you're going to meet all the beauty standards of like, our twisted beauty standard world, right? And so there are certainly procedures that you can go through, like maybe hair transplant, or there's like plasma-rich platelets, or PRP, I think that's what it stands for. And there's microneedling, which can be really effective. And some of these treatments are awesome. If you want to do that, that's amazing. You can also do scalp massage and things like that. But yeah, sometimes this is just a natural process as your skin ages healthfully, and that's okay. And I want to just say that because there are so many brands out there that are like, you have to fix this to look beautiful. And I don't believe that that's true.
Heck yeah, I think that's a really important message. And I like the way that you frame this too. We're talking about circulation and ways that you can naturally support the health of your scalp. This is not a way to get away from DHT or a nutrient deficiency. We're not doctors. We can tell you about baseline care and support. But if there's something extra going on, like Lydia is saying, that's a conversation for a nutritionist or a dermatologist.
Yeah, exactly. And so we'll tell you here how to kind of build that base routine, which I'm super excited about. Yeah.
All right, so Lydia has framed this a bit as the circulation highway, that your blood is taking en route from your blood vessels to the hair follicle. So we're going to talk now about why that highway matters. Blood flow, that circulation highway, is how oxygen gets delivered to your scalp. It's how nutrients are arriving at your follicle. And it's also how waste products from everything that's going on up here are being removed. Hair follicles are metabolically active tissue. They need energy to function, and that energy is arriving through your circulation. Without consistent flow, blood flow into your scalp, even the best internal nutrition or the most expensive topical routine can't do its job. Modern lifestyles are working against circulation in some subtle ways. Lydia mentioned chronic stress as a cause of hair loss. Chronic stress is also working against your circulation. Long hours at screens, forward head posture, jaw clenching, and neck tension, all of these things are affecting the way that blood is flowing to your head and scalp. And so we often think of circulation as something that you either have or do not have. Like, I've got a lot of friends who are always on about, oh, I've got bad circulation. But the truth is, circulation is something that can be supported or restricted. And whether it's supported or restricted is reliant on your daily habits and how you're addressing your circulation. So the question becomes less about how to force circulation or whether or not I have good or bad circulation, and it's more about how to stop getting in the way of your own circulation. So Lydia, the question I want to pass to you then is, what is actually helping blood flow on this highway? How can we improve this circulation or put ourselves in a position where good circulation can occur?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of like two ways to think about this. The first is just your overall circulatory system health, and then the other piece is specific to your scalp. One of the biggest things is like being active throughout the day. Like over time, just caring for your circulatory system by moving and eating healthy. And like it's always funny because the things come back to that all the time, I feel like.
Yeah.
If
Get
you
some good
do,
sleep, go work out, make sure you're eating good. Like, oh, thanks.
yeah, take care of your body systems. Yeah, I mean, the key thing here with the scalp is like we said, it needs to have that blood flow of nutrients directly into the follicle. And so, yeah, Yorick mentioned like oxygen is really important. The oxygen directly is vital in the ATP generation process, which is the process by which the cell generates units of energy. Think about it this way. Your hair isn't really like that necessary to your overall function as a human, right? And if you are overstressed or something's happening, your body's not going to care about supplying energy to your hair. That's kind of my theory, right? But if you want to like kind of know what energy is supplied, it's like through ATP, that's oxygen that's getting carried there. And then there's also nutrients. We talked about iron, zinc, amino acids need to reach the follicle. And then Yorick mentioned the waste removal. So really the fix is you don't really need like new quote unquote blood to the head. The blood is getting to your head, right? It's that you need to improve the specific vessel that is getting into your hair follicle.
There are two places we can attack circulation. The first is your general circulatory system, where doing things that improves your heart health, doing things that improve your lung health, cardio, eating well, sleeping well, that's going to support your general circulation. And then when we zoom in on the scalp, you're saying that it's not about blood flowing there. The blood is always going to be flowing there. The question then is, how do we improve the health of the vessels that are actually reaching the hair follicle?
Yeah, so basically, when we zoom in then to the scalp, it's less about if you're already taking care of your circulatory system, it's less about like getting more blood to the scalp or to the scalp surface. It's about getting the blood with the right nutrients to the specific hair follicles. And there are some cool things we can do to help. And we're going to talk about those. The first things I want to cover are things that don't necessarily help, because sometimes it's good to just know what's not working before we dive into what is. And so the first thing is, we already talked about this a little bit, but your skin has multiple layers. And so the actual hair follicle sits like 4 to 6 millimeters under the surface of your skin. So if you're trying to use a topical product, for example, as we age, we start to lose collagen. When we lose collagen, that decreases the elasticity of our skin. We know what happens on our face. We get wrinkles, our skin sags a little bit. Same thing happens to your scalp. Your skin starts to sag a little. That can stretch the hair follicles. It can cause some damage and make hair growth more difficult as we age. So many products will say, hey, collagen, biotin, apply this serum to your scalp. Those are huge molecules. Getting those molecules through your epidermis, down to your dermis, and into your hair follicle, when, as we said, there's that one sort of like important key point of contact for all of the nutrients to go into your hair follicle, is going to be really, really, really difficult. Many of those products are at best moisturizing your scalp, which is fine, but if they're super expensive, maybe you want to buy a different moisturizer or a different product. So just be aware that these big proteins, these big molecules that people are trying to get into your skin, doesn't usually work. The second thing is, our skin's health really depends on the health of the skin barrier, which involves this like beautiful, like lipid, fatty, sort of oily barrier that protects our skin. So if we're using alcohol or water-based products, or we're doing something really harsh to our skin, with the exception of some exfoliation, but you don't want to be exfoliating a lot, then you're going to be stripping away that protective skin barrier. And so if you are using something that's not oil-based, just be aware that sometimes that can also cause more irritation, and it's sometimes better to use more oil product to kind of mimic and protect that skin barrier. The third thing is, just be aware if something says that it has like active peptides. We'll just do a general example. Many of these products contain a very, very, very low concentration of whatever material they're claiming is going to cause change or functional change on your skin. So a lot of these products, if they're selling them for, $10 or something, there's no way that the active ingredient is in there at a concentration that will have any change on your skin. So just be aware of these things as you're buying products, because often we spend a lot of money trying to fix the problem, but we can really narrow down the product search just by kind of thinking about those three things. So that's kind of what doesn't work. And then I think we're going to get into a little bit of like what does work now.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about things that you can actually do. So when we talk about things that do work for supporting scalp health and hair growth, I think the number one thing that comes to people's minds is medication. And when people think about scalp and medication, personally, I'm immediately thinking about minoxidil. I think minoxidil is the most common reference point, and for good reason. It does work really well for some people, and it works by increasing blood flow and prolonging the growth phase of that hair follicle. But minoxidil also has limitations. Firstly, it can cause irritation. It also requires lifelong use. So once you start taking it, you got to keep taking it. And if you stop, then you're going to see a lot of that hair growth that you got start to roll back. And most importantly for me, minoxidil doesn't really address the overall health of the scalp environment. And that's where these conversations can get a bit more nuanced. Medication is one pathway and stimulation is another. And neither should be treated as a universal solution. The shared message here is that there's more than one way to support blood flow to the scalp. And the best approach depends on what is actually happening in someone's body and your own personal preferences around treatment. The good news is if you're somebody who is not a fan of medication, there are some really interesting natural remedies available to you. So I'll pass it over to Lydia, who can explain some of the biochemistry behind those.
Yeah. So one thing, just doing a massage on your head for like 4 minutes a day can really help increase blood flow and improve blood flow specifically to your hair follicles. The reasoning behind that is actually really cool. Basically, the literal mechanical stretching and movement of the tissue creates a mechanical pull, and that translates into a biochemical signaling pathway. And there's a couple different pathways involved, and I don't want to dive too deep into the actual like signaling pathways because those can get complex right away. But one of the ones that's involved is basically this pathway in like wound healing. And so basically you can think of like mechanical stressing of your scalp as this kind of gentle way to trigger wound healing, which in turn brings the blood flow back up into the hair follicles. And so that's one of the pathways that gets turned on. There's a lot of like nuances to this, but it's been shown if you massage your scalp, you can improve the overall blood flow to the hair follicles. And there's a lot of different things you can buy if you want to. Like some people really like those little electronic scalp massagers. Oh, yeah. There's like the ones that you can do like that, or you can just give yourself a massage. Just make sure you're not using your fingernails. You don't want to scratch your scalp, right? We're not trying to damage the tissue. We're trying to gently, mechanically mobilize the cells on the outside. And then a little deeper into that is you can go and you can get something like microneedling done. Microneedling also is going to stimulate the wound healing processes, and it goes a little deeper right into your tissue because you're using an actual needle. But again, that process is done in a way that's relatively gentle. So you're not like scratching your scalp. You're going to be going through this process that's basically going to put a needle into your scalp. It's going to go down like the right amount, and it's going to trigger some of those like wound healing pathways again. And that's going to bring the blood flow back. And so if you want to do microneedling, just make sure you go to someone who's, certified to do it, and they are reviewed very well, online, or you find them through a good reference. And you can also use topical, like natural treatments if you want to. There's a few that have been studied, and I think we'll dig into it a little bit. But the general idea is that these botanical solutions are going to be absorbed into your skin, which, by the way, if you do microneedling, it also helps absorption. So if you're doing that in a partnership with some kind of like topical cream, it can often increase the effect of the topical cream as well.
It helps it reach that dermis layer, right?
Yeah, it just absorbs a little bit better. Yeah, exactly. And so, if you're using something topical on your scalp, you're going to be looking for something that replenishes your skin barrier. You can think of like jojoba oil or other oils that mimic your skin barrier as a good solution for that. You're also going to be looking at things that increase stimulation or circulatory flow in the scalp. And a few that have been studied somewhat. There are a lot of things, but really when you're thinking about what's been studied well, there's probably just a handful. And today I think we'll talk a little bit about rosemary and peppermint, but basically what you're doing there is whatever chemicals you're putting on your head are getting absorbed in, and those chemicals are also translating into now this signaling pathway to essentially help with your health of your hair follicle. And so it's more like a chemical key rather than a mechanical key in that case.
Lydia, you were mentioning oils like jojoba being really good for moisturizing and mimicking that skin barrier on your scalp, which, as we know, is going to be really important for the health of your scalp. So I wanted to just talk briefly about those oils. They're not just a cosmetic thing. Like, I think a lot of us have the image of the, frou-frou hair mask on the shelf at the pharmacy. It seems like a nice self-care ritual or something that might add a lot of shine to your hair, but something I want to emphasize is these oils actually do matter in the scalp health process that we're discussing today. They reduce friction, they support the scalp barrier, and they make massage easier and more comfortable, which is going to encourage you to consistently actually do the massage that Lydia is talking about, that mechanical stimulation. From a sustainability perspective, plant oils are renewable and biodegradable tools. They're natural chemicals. Not all chemicals are bad. They align well with low waste routines and long-term care thinking. When used intentionally, oils are not about coating the hair. They're about supporting the environment where the hair grows. This is how we think about products. For example, our rosemary and peppermint hair and scalp oil. They're not some like miracle cure, but they are a facilitator of a healthy ritual. And those specific ingredients, the rosemary and peppermint, I think are particularly interesting. So I'd like to pass this to Lydia so she can explain a bit about why we chose rosemary and peppermint as ingredients for our hair and scalp oil.
Yeah, and I'm going to start with, like we mentioned earlier, that a lot of products that include essential oils. Oh, and if you've also watched our previous podcast, we talked about this a bit, but like with any essential oil, you want to be careful about a couple things. The first is like you want to make sure that the brand that you're buying from is using the actual real essential oil that hasn't been over processed or isn't some kind of dupe, right? Especially for stuff like this, because if you want to see any functional benefit, you need to be using the real thing. And then the second part is you want to be careful about concentration. Essential oils are functional, so if you go too high, it will irritate your scalp. So this is a PSA, do not go buy pure peppermint essential oil and put that on your scalp. It will irritate you. It will not be good, right? Like,
this is why we have the PhD chemist formulating our stuff, so we can get those concentrations right, because we're not trying to burn anyone's scalp.
Right. You need a diluted concentration, but you also need something that is going to be felt. So when you think about peppermint, this one's really easy to think about. So peppermint has menthol in it, and menthol is actually a calcium channel blocker. What that really is just meaning is like in the blood vessel walls, basically, there's smooth muscle tissue that like surround them, right? And when you use menthol, you're basically relaxing that tissue and you're allowing for more blood to flow. So it actually is, considered a vasodilator in some instances. So if you ever use something with peppermint, you'll notice there's this nice cooling effect.
Yeah.
And it will tingle a little. It shouldn't hurt. It should just tingle. And that's like actually the feeling of those blood vessels kind of opening and allowing more blood flow.
That's so
That's
cool.
what that tingling is.
I think we've all felt that, but then to have that perspective that's actually your blood vessels kind of opening up. That's really cool to hear.
Yeah. So when you're looking for products with peppermint, that's why they can be effective. If you're looking at rosemary, rosemary has been studied a little bit more clinically. There have been studies that show that head to head, the same amount of rosemary matches minoxidil. And to be like quite honest, right? Like there needs to be more research on all of this, but it's compelling, right? And it is evidence. And a lot of people have used rosemary and it has really helped their hair growth or their scalp health. So it's based in evidence, but of course, with everything, we'd always like more evidence.
More.
In this case, always want more evidence as a scientist. But with the case of rosemary, right? Like, again, like we're not using a super high concentration, but we're not using a super low concentration either. And essentially there's a couple compounds in rosemary essential oil. One is called 1,8-cineol, and it's a really lipophilic, meaning it loves to be in oil and it can penetrate deeper into the skin. So it really loves to be like oily, and your skin is oily. The outside of your skin cells are made out of phospholipids, and this thing will go easily into your skin. And so that's why people use rosemary more than other types of essential oils. Yeah, so you have like, these two beautiful essential oils. They also smell good, they feel good. And then you have them sitting in a carrier oil. We use jojoba oil because that is actually almost a perfect mimic of your skin barrier. And so you're essentially like putting the oil on your scalp, and then it is mimicking that barrier, it's protecting your skin, and then these active ingredients are, going into your skin cells. The best way to do this is to put the drops of the oil onto your scalp and then to do your 4-minute massage like York said. It's going to be really easy and really pleasant to do the massage, and then leave it on there for 20 to 30 minutes and wash it. So you want to do this on the days when you're washing your hair, and you don't want to overwash your hair, right? So I really recommend, like, if you have a hair washing routine that you already do and it works for you, just add this in as a step to your regular routine and wash it out as part of that process, and just see how it feels for you. I do not use this every day because I don't wash my hair every day. So it's going to be different for different people.
Yeah, I think, Lydia, also what you're saying about adding it to your existing routine is really important. Hair care can often be very reactive, like, oh, my hair feels dry today, so I'm going to add this oil, or it's really greasy today, so I need to wash it out. We see a change and then we scramble to fix it. But circulation, barrier health, and tissue support are all going to benefit from preventative attention. Like Benjamin Franklin said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So those rituals, like Lydia's saying, if you already have this hair washing ritual, you may not even think of it as a ritual, but if you're always washing your hair on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, or some such nonsense, these rituals create consistency. They lower the mental barrier to care, and they fit into your real life in a way that some extreme, like 30-step routine just simply isn't going to. So when you can add things like a 4-minute massage with a oil or a rosemary and peppermint oil to your hair care routine, when this hair care becomes regular and a gentle practice instead of some crisis response, your body's going to have time to respond, and your scalp's going to have time to build a healthy, growth-oriented environment on your head.
Yeah. And one thing I'll add to that is just like, as you are creating, this ritual for your skin health, if you're doing consistent care for your scalp and you are creating a healthy environment, the transition from unhealthy, quote unquote, to healthy takes sometimes 3 to 6 months. So again, with anything like exercising or trying to change your body, like, just think about it. Like, to actually change your body takes time. This consistency and doing a routine that works for you is so important, because if you really want to see the results, it's going to take some time. And that's okay, right? But like, you want to do something that works for you. And so that's the biggest emphasis here, is like, go see your dermatologist, figure it out, decide what works for you, and really invest in the products that you know are real, are healthy, work for your skin type, and don't pay attention to all the trendy stuff that says, hey, in 2 weeks, you're going to see increased hair growth or something like that, because it honestly does take time to see these results.
Absolutely, yeah. There's no instant cure. I think the idea that I'd like to leave you guys with is, hair health is starting at the root. Circulation, nourishment, and care are all things that are going to work together to support hair health. And there's no single ingredient or product that can replace a healthy scalp environment. If you want to go deeper, we have a full blog post on circulation and scalp health that expands on the science and the practical takeaways. We would also love to hear your questions in the comments. And if you want more conversations like this, please subscribe so you do not miss future episodes. If you want to go deeper, we have a full blog post on circulation and scalp health that expands on the science and the practical takeaways. We would also love to hear your questions in the comments below. And if you want more conversations like this, subscribe so you do not miss a future episode. Thanks for being here. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, let's see.